Hey everyone, once again this is Mr. Gosarix Saija taking you to the bar lectures. So before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, share so that you can see more of these bar lectures. Once again, Mr. Gosarix Saija. Now today's bar lecture is going to measure a focus on something you're going to call evolution. That is our bar lecture today. There is something here we're going to call what? This is called evolution here. So what comes into your mind when you hear the word evolution? You get the word evolution just comes from the word two major processes here that we're going to look at here. This just means what to call evolve. Evolve. That means changing from one state to another. This means you are changing from one state to another. We say you're evolving, or you say changing. You're changing from one state to another. That's what you call now evolving, or evolving there. Then what to call this torsion here, this one here. This major section here, this one here, is majorly meaning what we call, it is the process. It's a process. The action of doing the process of evolving is what we call now the torsion. That's something like that. That means if you can combine the two words here, we evolve and what we call the action part of it is going to give what we call the evolution there. And therefore, a process, and remember this evolve, the word evolving does not take one day. It must need some adequate time. You get? If you have to change from one state to another, there must be some ample time given. And therefore, if we can combine these words here, or these two words here, therefore we're going to come out what we call something called a gradual process, because it takes some gradual process. That means I will say it is a gradual process. Something very interesting, members. It is a gradual process. I remember this one here, it has to take place from generation to generation here. For example, if my body changes, you get, if part of my body changes into another person, that means that person who has produced my kid is also going to have those changes there that are going to evolve. That means this is a gradual process. It can take a longer period of time. That means I would say it is from generation to generation. That means that defining evolution is the process by which new offsprings, that means we are forming new offsprings. We are forming them from what? From those that are already existing. That means we have what to call the pre-existing organisms. So it's a process by which new organisms or new species or new offsprings are formed from those that are already existing. So these pre-existing ones here are forming what to call the new offsprings. The new offsprings. So the new offsprings are being formed from what we call those that already into existence. But this is from generation to generation, but of a long period of time. It takes time. So we say this one means time. You get? Then this means generation to generation. So this one is pre-exist. That means this is going to be number one. We are forming the offsprings. This is a gradual process. It's supposed to be the third, it can be the third. Then generation is going to be what? This is going to be the fourth one. That's what we call now the interesting part, which is called now evolution. The process by which new offsprings are formed. You can say the gradual process through which the new offsprings are formed from those that are already in existence, from generation to generation here. Of course, if I can give an example, in the past years we had what to call based on the ancient organism that human beings that live, were major what to call the apes. We had to call the apes, the ones that were living in those past years. We have the apes. But these apes here, remember the first they had something very interesting here. They even had what to call something like the tail here. They had the tail. This was the tail. This was a tail, and most of them were bending. They were bending down. They would move while bending, just like monkeys. But as generation went on, we form what to call now. They went on changing, producing and then changing. The animals that would be produced, they would change. Now those that have changed would also reproduce and then again change. At the end, they formed now a human being who is normal, and this human being here, we are seeing the human being here, does not have any tail. This is a normal what? Human being. But this one was a gradual process. This is called evolution. We formed in the present day. This one what we call the acid. This was the acid human being. the ancient organisms that he lived first. This was taken to be the apes, the monkeys, gorillas, and so on. But now we have what we call the present, or the modern organism, which is called a human being. But this was a gradual process. It takes some good years to happen. So after seeing what evolution is, there are very many scientists who come down to explain how indeed an organism has come onto Earth. That's something a bit different. We have what we call explaining how an organism has come into existence, and what is the origin of life is a bit different from what we call evolution. Because in evolution here, we basically look at change of the organism. In other words, moving from one step to another. You get? You're the same organism. We are not explaining how life came about, no. We are explaining how one organism changes to form another organism. So as we can trace the origin, where did we come from? How was that trend of the change? Let's listen here. We have what called the two scientists that have come across to put what called the two theories. We have what called the Lamarck's the mechanism of evolution. I want to see how does evolution take place here. We have what called the mechanism of what evolution here. This is now going to be our center of gravity here. The mechanism of evolution here. Now we have this scientist here. He was what called Lamarck. This was what called the scientist which is called what? This is what called what? Lamarck here. This Lamarck was an interesting scientist, members. This Lamarck here tried to explain how organisms can be formed. In other words, how new organisms came into existence. What did he use here? Lamarck came up to what we call a theory, which is called Lamarck's theory. And majorly, his theory here was majorly focusing on what we call two major components. The first component of Lamarck's theory are the components of Lamarck's theory. Now, the first component of Lamarck's theory, members, it was something very interesting here. This was use and disuse. What was his focus here? Then the second component was how to call inheritance of acquired traits. Now, this man believed that when you are having a body structure, or that if you're having a body structure, or if you have any part of the body and you keep on using it, this part here can reach at a point and then begins to change. To get it can evolve, it can change. To get it can become stronger, it can become large, it can become so thick, it can because it be that when you keep on using it, it can change and form what called a complex organism. And by doing that, that complex structure that has been formed, if you happen to mate, it can be passed on what called the younger generation. You get? And he supported his theory using what we call a very good example of what we call the giraffe. This is what we call the giraffe. You have here, this is what we call the giraffe. The giraffe is here. Using the giraffe here to support his theory here. You get? He said that in the past, we have what we call here, that in the past, this is the ancient giraffe. This is the modern giraffe we are seeing here. The modern giraffe. So this man said that in the past we had what we call the short-necked giraffe. Because his major focus was the environment. It was like the environment has a very big impact on our nature in us evolving. In other words, for us to change the environment impacts a lot on our changes. So it was like these changes here that we have impacted due to the environment, we can be able to pass them to the young ones, which we are going to see and we prove whether it is correct or not. Now, this man here, he believed that in the past, we had what we call the short-necked giraffes. If you can look at this neck here, this is a giraffe here, and then I look at what we call this neck here. If I can measure approximately, this can be around like 50 centimeter of what we call the neck. This is the neck. And then look at this neck here. This is something very interesting here. This is what we call 100 centimeter. This one of the neck of the giraffe. This man said that these short-necked giraffes here, they are the ones that dominated the earth in the past years. But they were hit by what we call the environmental factor. What was this one here? Drought hit them seriously. So when the drought hitting them seriously, because they would always grasp, they would always feed what we call They always feel what to call something called, there was what to call the green vegetation here. The green vegetation here, the green plants that were here. The green plants that were here. You get? This was their main source of food. You get? So they would bend the neck and then they just eat what? This grass here. But this grass here, these plants we are seeing here, these are the plants that we are seeing here. They were hit by what to call the drought. There was what to call serious drought. Serious drought hit them. Serious drought, that's what we call now drought hit them. Too much drought hit these what? These plants here. After hitting them, now let us see what happened. What happened after hitting them? Now, these plants here, they began drying off. They dried off. Dried off. And therefore, there was the whole vegetation here. It had to perish. It had to perish. What happened now? The problem came that what were they going to be eating? Now the food, they lacked what to eat. So what happened is that some of these giraffes, that is short-necked giraffes here, they began extending their neck, prolonging and elongating their neck. So as they can extend to reach what to call now the vertical. Because at the first one, I call the short ones. But now when the environmental factors hit, the drought hit, they could not easily get what to eat. So what happened is that they had to begin feeding on what to call now the long plant cover. The long plant cover, like this. These are the plants. They are the plants. The long plants. So what to call the short what? Short plants. So because of feeding on this one, they began extending their neck. That's why you see that this one, its neck is short, this neck is long. Why? It is being prolonged so as they can extend further to eat on what to call this vegetation here. You get? So it was like because of that, that's why we have what to call the present day long-necked giraffes. It did not stop from there. He also went on and was like, he examined the what to call the snakes. In the ancient years, that seemed like 98 million years, that was around 98 million years. That's something very interesting. 8 million years. Yes. There was what to call a given type of the snake here, which is what called the Najaras. This is what called the Najaras snake. The Najaras. This is the type of the snake that lived in those years. And that snake, one, it had some features that were very interesting. It was thick. Look at this one here from here. It was thick. That's one. Secondly, it was also short. It was short. You can't even look at it. It's short. It was short. You can even also look at it. It was very short and you can see it was short. And also, you can see how to call some limbs here. It has what to call the rims here. The rims. Something very interesting. Now, these limbs here will just be used for what to call the graspers. They were working as graspers. Working as graspers. As graspers. Just for attachment to the objects or the trees and so on. Now, what happened is that in the 85 million years, that means after some years and past, that means now in 85 million years back, 85 million years, he discovered another species of the organism. What was that? This species of the organism from the same country called Argentina. This species of the organism of the snake was not having what to call, it was one, features one, it was very interesting. It had what to call, it was what to call, had no ribs. It had no ribs, that's one. Secondly, this organism here was also thin. Third, it was also what to call, it was also short, long. It was long, something very interesting. Now this man here concluded that because this organism here, it is lacking what to call the claspers or the limbs. It indicates that this organism here it lost the limbs because it was trying, because this was terrestrial. It was terrestrial snake. It would live on land. So it was like this organism here lost the limbs because it was just trying to adapt to live under the ground. You get? So when it was trying to adapt to live underground, it had to use its claspers or the limbs here. You get? And this one explains now also the present type of the snakes that we are having. It's believed that most of those snakes there, they lost their limbs as you're trying to adjust to live in the soil and also the ground. They had to go off. And then they had to pass on their genes. And sorry, they had to pass on their structures that they are having without legs, without limbs to the young ones. Hence explaining why we have the snakes of today without what to call the limbs. That was how to call now something called the Lamarck's theory. Now, I want us to look at now the summary of what to call Lamarck's theory. Something very interesting, members. Summary of what to call Lamarck's theory. This is something very interesting. We say summary. Summary of Lamarck theory. That's very interesting. Want to see what I want to call the summaries of what to call the Lamarck's theory. I want to call this as we continue. So when we talk about Lamarck's theory, is that he had what to call the summary of what to call the Lamarck's theory. There's something very interesting here. Now his major summary were most focused on to call on like 3 to major summaries his findings. One was majorly looking at, he said that majorly the organisms, that means variation in the size of the organisms. That means, in other words, organisms become complex. In other words, organisms become complex. That's very interesting. Before I go to that, I want you to look at something interesting here. If this is the thigh, this is the thigh, you get? Maybe of an athlete, let me just use this structure here, this one here, the muscle, something very interesting here. So this one is lifting. I'm going to say it is holding something very interesting here. It is holding something very interesting. It is holding something very interesting here. What is it? Holding, let me say, a bigger stone here. What is this? This one is 50 kilogram stone. You get? This is the stone. Now what's going to happen is here, this is the muscle here, the structure of the body. This man was like, that a structure which is holding, when you keep on using this part of the body, what's happening is that it becomes more complex. This one is going to move from this shape here, and then you find it along increasing size like this one here. This is one, this is the second one. So that means here it has become more complex. It is now more complex. That means it was like when you keep on using an organ or the structure of the body, it becomes how to call what? Becomes complex. That's something very interesting here. Something very interesting here. Now, why? Because they want to call rapid cell multiplication, division, and then formation of the new cells. So they make the structure be so complex. Secondly, this was number one. His second summary was like the organisms increasing in size. That means when you keep on using them, they increase in what to call what? Increase in size. When you keep on using the structure of the body, it can increase in what to call what? The size. That was taken because you can see that apart from becoming complex, it has moved from here up to here. That means that the size has what? Has increased. First was becoming complex. Second, that this structure can increase in what? Size. Now, what was next was like these new organisms that are formed here, when you form the new organism that is formed here, it is the structure which has been formed here. It has a tendency of being done what? Of being, in other words, it acquires new traits. It becomes a new structure. It becomes new structure. And this new structure here, if it happens to mate and reproduce, it is going to pass on what we call the acquired traits to the next what? Next generation. That was his most of his summary here. You get that when you keep on using part of the body, it can become complex, and then the size is going to increase. You get? And then when you happen to mate with an individual and they produce an offspring, this offspring here is going to inherit this size, this large size in the structure. That was according to Lamarck. You get? Now, what to go to what you call the shortcomings of what to call Lamarck is shortcomings. That's something very interesting here. Shortcomings of what to call the Lamarck. In other words, there were some loopholes in his theory. You get? Because his theory is majorly used on what? Ratios. We say shortcomings of Lamarck's theory. That is shortcomings. Shortcomings of Lamarck's theory. What was his shortcomings? But it's something very interesting. Theory. That is shortcomings. As you can see here, shortcomings. Something very interesting here. Now, what is shortcoming of this man here? So when you observe this man here, remember, someone who's watching there, we can say that it is not true that any factor, any character that is as a result of the environment can be inherited. That's something very wrong. You get? Environmental factors, they just only change the phenotype. In other words, we have what to call the shortcoming, what to call the environmental factors only have an impact. We can say environmental factors. They only just have what to call an impact on what to call what? The phenotype. In other words, the genes are not influenced by what to call the what? The environmental factors. And therefore, since they are only influenced by what to call the phenotype, but not the genotype, it means that these characteristics here cannot be inherited. Cannot be inherited. You get? So any environmental factor that you acquire, maybe through practice, through experience, through what and what, cannot be inherited to the younger generation. You get? That was wrong with Lamarck, because for him it was like, so long as you acquire a character, can be transferred to what you call the what? The next generation, which is completely very wrong and not correct. Secondly, it was like when an organism becomes so complex, it means that the cells there have divided, and therefore those cells that are multiplied are going to be passed on to the next generation, which is not correct. The somatic cells or the body cells, somatic cells, also called what? Body cells. The cells we have in our bodies here, you get? If they happen to be changed maybe by anything else which is not genetical. For example, you're moving and maybe someone maybe burns you with fire, maybe water, some hot water pours on your body. It will not affect the young generation. Why? Because something to be passed on to the next generation, it must be affecting what we call the spermatic, in other words, the gonad cells, or the productive what? Cells. So it is only the productive cells that can influence the trait, in other words, the change of an organism. You get? Only reproductive cells or the gonad cells can influence the change of an organism. You get? So it was not true that an organism can change when the structure of the organism changes. It can also change. That's something not correct based on what Lamarck had said. Then secondly, maybe we can just we just appreciate this man here because his research and his findings had to contribute something into to the science. What was his benefit? Now what? The beneficial part of it. The beneficial part of what Lamarck here. Now this man here helped us to know that environmental factors have an impact on an organism because of this environment here. That means environmental factors, they have what to call what? An impact or a change on the phenotype of an organism. Impact on organism what? Organism trait. That's one. Secondly, he enabled us to know that there is always transfer of characteristics from the parents to the offspring. Though he did not explain how exactly. He did not have an idea about the genes. He didn't know the genes. But he helped us know that there must be transferring of characteristics from the parents up to the what? Offspring. That means you can also let's here give us knowledge. Knowledge about what? About inheritance. You get? That was the Lamarck's stuff of the finding. So in summary, I'm just going to summarize what I've been explaining here. We have seen that we have what to call something called what? Evolution here. Something called evolution. That's what's our summary here. How about to call evolution here? That's a summary. The summary. Something called evolution here. We saw what to call evolution. So this is a gradual process through which new organisms are formed from those that are already existing, but over a long period of time. Then we see that this evolution here is kind of what to call two major ones, components. One what to call evolve, which means coming out. Another one is the formation of the new organisms. Then the one, this torsion here, or the TION, just means what to call is the process, the mechanism. You get? Then we see that this process of evolution here, we give an example of the ape, that an ape, that with the organisms who are living present, the human being, the Homo sapien, came on changing from the ape up to the present organism. Then we say we have what to call mechanisms through which this evolution takes place here. So we have what to call Lamarck's theory. This was the scientist who's using the word use and disuse. That when you use a certain part of the body, it can change, become increase in size, and then after that increase in size can also be able to be passed on to the next generation. So we talked about what to call the use and the disuse. Then we also talked about now that these traits here can be inherited. You can copy them and then you give them to the what? The new generation. That means you can say inheritance. So his major factor was on what? Use and disuse, but what we call inheritance here. Then we saw that also that as this man was trying to play around with his theory here, he did not only use the to satisfy his theory here, he applied what to call the giraffe, where how what to call the short-necked, giraffe what to call the long what? Long-necked giraffe. That the short-necked giraffe, the one that lived within the past years, were the ancient organisms to live, but because of the calamity like the drought, most of them, the grass was destroyed and therefore they could not access the long leaves. Therefore, they had to stretch their necks so as they can reach what? The leaves there. And then those that could not stretch their necks, they remained, they died off because they could not get what to eat. And therefore, giving the room for only the long-necked giraffes. That's one. Then we also talked about what to call now, what to call the snakes. The snake here, you observe the snake over the 98 million years old, using what called the process of what called paleontology. You saw the fossils of this snake. You found out that this snake here was having what to call limbs. That's one, called the claspers. Also having what to call, apart from the limbs, also having what to call, it was thick, it was also short. But the present snake, which was around 85 million years, it was not having limbs, so we say it was limbless. It was thin, it was short, so it was long. You get? That was his finding as Lamarck. Then, what happened is that now, this man went on to do what to call summarize the theories. That one is it. Summary of his theory. Summary of his theory. What was his summary here? His summary of the theory was like, when you use part of the body, it becomes complex. And this complex part here, it is the part of the body, using the part of the body. It becomes complex, that's one. Second was like, this part of the body here, it can also increase in what? Increase in size. It can also become more, after getting increase in size, this structure here can also be passed on to next what? Generation. That was his. Then the shortcomings. This man had what to call some shortcomings, which I'm going to put somewhere here. The shortcomings. The shortcomings. That one is the loopholes that we saw in his theory. So we proved that this man here, we talked about the environmental, that his major focus was the environment was having an impact on an organism, which is not complete, which is not wrong, but it's not good, because the environment just only has an impact on the phenotype, not the what? That means effect of what? Of environment. So that was his shortcomings. He could not explain why an organism could form into another organism. It was not true that the environment has a hand in forming a new organism. It just only influences the phenotype, not the what? Genotype. But it did not have an idea about the genes. Secondly, it was not true that the somatic cells, that was the body cells, if a body cells change, this change can be expressed by an organism. No. The somatic cells have no any impact on what? On evolution of an organism. It is only what we call the gonad cells or the reproductive what? Cells, which can cause an organism to do what? To change. Therefore, but the benefits, in other words, benefits, we saw that this man here, the benefits of his theory, it gave room for scientists to know that there is inheritance taking place. Secondly, it gave room to the scientists to know that the environment has an impact on formation of new organisms. Now, in the next lecture, we're going to look at what we call Darwin's theory.